everybody? What's up? Everybody good? All right, here's what I want everybody to do. I want everybody to stand up real quick. Everybody stand up. Stand up real quick. And I want you to turn to somebody that is standing beside you, and you have to face them like in there, like looking them eye to eye. So if it's awkward, it's even better, okay? So you're standing face to face, and if you can't find anybody to stand face to face with, hurry up and find somebody. Who doesn't have a partner? Who doesn't have a partner? Raise your hand, mingle, practice your social skills. That way you don't have to join the sorority or fraternity and buy your friends, okay? So, everybody facing each other now. Here's where it gets awkward. I want you to put your hands, y'all nervous? Put your hands on the shoulders of the person that you're staring at. I love the fact that some of you tough football guys are like touching each other this intimately. It's just awesome. And now I want you to look deep into the eyes of the person that you're touching. Deep in their eyes. And I want you to say these words to them very, very sincerely. Are you ready? Repeat after me. Don't look at me, look at them. I want you to say, I love you. No. That was not sincere, okay? You gotta be an actor right now, okay? Here we go, try it again. Hey, dudes, you know better. Turn and face each other. All right, here we go. Y'all ready? I love you. I believe in you. May I give you a hug? And if they say yes, give them a hug. You aren't supposed to repeat that part. Awesome. 3 claps on 3. 1, 2, 3. Whoa. That sucked like an airplane toilet. Let's try it again. 3 claps on 3. 1, 2, 3. Y'all can sit down and y'all give our worship team an unbelievable hand. How awesome are they? So incredible. So here's the thing. We're going to talk for most of the rest of this afternoon about something that everybody in this room considers important, even though you may not think you do. How many of you watch this? How many of you one day would love to get married? Raise your hand. How many of you don't have any plans and you could not care less? Okay, girls, guys, those are the people you want to avoid, okay? This is like Tinder right here, not you, okay? But here's what we all know. We all know, for you as a middle schooler or a high schooler, you know this better than my generation. Part of the reason why there are a lot of you in this room that have no inclination, no desire whatsoever to get married one day is because you watched what's happened to your mom and dad. See, this time last year, some of you would have raised your hand. But here's the heartbreaking part, adults. That some of you as a middle schooler, some of you as a high schooler, and yeah, even some of you as college students, this time last year, mom and dad seemed to be together, but they don't love each other anymore. Let's be real with each other. Some of us in this room, we may have never even met our mom, may have never met our dad, or the person that we know to be our father isn't someone that we look up to. The person that we know is our mom, and we certainly don't look at their marriage and go, that's exactly what I want love to be. And so adults, here's what I would love to say in front of my friends. There's only one reason I'm here, teenagers. I'm not here as a communicator, a speaker. It's why I really don't care about being introduced. I am here because I'm the father of a son and 2 daughters. One of those daughters is 17. The other is 20, and our son is 22. Our son lives in South America. Our oldest daughter, plays basketball and is right now playing basketball at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. And our youngest daughter just finished a soccer match. And I'm hearing you may be thinking, you're an awful dad because you're not watching your daughter play soccer. I have her permission because she thinks this is just as important as I do. Because she's like you. She's like every young lady in this room that hopes and prays that she could meet a young man that would be someone that she could maybe one day fall in love with. And here's a heads up to every guy in the room. The young ladies who pray for that are wondering if they're around. And while you guys giggle about that, I'm talking to the males. I'm gonna push and press you fellas, because I'm of the opinion that you have a responsibility to be better than you are. Because there are young ladies who desperately want to meet Mr. Right one day, and you may not be him now, but you can be. And then there are some guys in the room, heads up girls, that are going, I am Mr. Right. And where are you ladies, right? You're going, I'm right over here. And unfortunately, there are young ladies in the room, and here's what's happened with you. You have so lowered your standards that it's really difficult for you to look for the right kind of person, because everyone around you seems to be at this mediocre sub-level in relationships. And there are middle school students in the room, and this is your thing as a 6th, 7th, 8th grader, 5th grader, however old you are. There are some of you middle school students in the room, and you're convinced you're in love. And here's what I want to say to every 6th grader that's in this room that thinks they're in love. No, you're not. No, you're not. No, I am. He can't even drive. He has a tricycle. Chill out, okay? You need to stop all the noise about being in love and go make up your bed. That's what you need to do. And here to let you in on a secret, teenagers, part of the reason why this is a tension point, and part of the reason why your leaders found it this important for us to take an afternoon to wrestle with this, for there to be tension in the room, part of the reason why is because we as a culture have sold you a false set of goods, and we also underestimate your capacity to rise above the chatter and everything that culture says that you're to be about relationally. And let me tell you why some of that exists. I talked to adults last night, for those of you that care, and I threw a picture up on the screen. The picture was of this gentleman right here. Some of you are like, Grandpa? No. This gentleman's name, maybe it is your granddad, but this gentleman's name is G. Stanley Hall. My last name is Hall, but I'm not kin to this cat. G. Stanley Hall was the first American child psychologist. And in 1904, G. Stanley Hall had a side hustle, just like some of you, you have to go to school, you play on whatever particular sport, or you do drama, or you're in band or whatever. Those are your extracurricular activities, but there are things that you have to do. G. Stanley Hall, by education and trade, was a child psychologist, but his side hustle was evolution theory. He was a nerd. And he studied evolution theory to this degree that he actually invented a concept and a word. Some adults in this room, and maybe even some of you teenagers, you've heard of this word. It's a word called recapitulation. And it sounds extremely fancy, and nobody's going to understand what it is, but you really, really do. Because here's what recapitulation simply means. It means that any species during that species' existence, or a particular part of that species, exhibits and portrays the same characteristics as when it is born, as it grows old, and then when it eventually dies. So, for example, right now, back at our house, I live just north of Atlanta, Georgia. 3 years ago, we had a black Labrador Retriever who died in my arms. And anybody ever had your dog die on you? It's not fun. And I bawled like a baby. We have 2 dogs. Or had 2 dogs. Cayman was our black lab, and we have this white Shih Tzu poodle mix, a Shih Tzu, named Rocky. I hate Rocky. But I've grown to love Rocky, especially after Cayman died. But Rocky, for the last several days, has been having seizures, and a couple of days ago, my wife had to take him to the vet. And the vet said, we're going to give you some medicine, and if this doesn't work, you're going to have to put Rocky down too. And here's what we've noticed with Cayman and Rocky, that they are born. And especially with Cayman, he was too big, his body was too big, he had these big old paws, and he would run and tumble into things, but eventually he grew into this mature dog, and we had him trained, and then from training he began to decline because he was getting old, and eventually he started having seizures, and while I'm holding them, they had to put him down, and that's what they do with dogs. Well, G. Stanley Hall said that humans have the same sort of thing happen to them. Recapitulation happens in humans. And when he talked about the period of time when humans are teenagers, students, he used words like this to describe you. He used words like stress, storm, emotionally volatile, moody, unpredictable, rebellious. To which some of you are looking at going, that guy knows me, right? Because a lot of us in this room, this is what you've been told. That's who you are, and that's who you're supposed to be in middle school and high school. He went another step. He actually divided humanity into 3 sections. He called children, this is interesting, he called children pre-humans. He called adults civilized man, and he called teenagers, get ready for it, savages. Now here's what's interesting, teenagers. That was in 1904. 20 years later, the entire child behavioral science society in the world debunked his idea of what it means to be a teenager. They said it isn't true. But isn't it interesting that when I started saying words like storm, stress, rebellious, volatile, moody, every adult in this room went, yep. And every teenager in this room went, how does he know? And here's the problem. Everybody look at me. For the last 113 years, people like me, adults, have said to you, this is how you're supposed to act and behave when you're a teenager, and teenagers are really, really good at raising to our expectation. You don't have to be that way. We just expect you to. But let me tell you why we're doing real love. We will not, don't underestimate you here. You do not have to be like everybody else as it relates to relationships. Who in the world sold you that false set of goods? Who convinced you, young ladies? Who convinced you that you have to send nudies for you to get a date? Who convinced you, fellas, that that is a part of what it means to be a teenager in 2018? Who convinced young men in this room that the way for you to be attractive to young ladies is to call them rude and crude names? Who convinced you of that? I told someone last night, adults, we're going to get real, and teenagers, I hope this is okay, but I told some adults last night, I have taught my daughters, if a guy calls you bitch, you call him an ambulance. But here's the reason why most of the adults in the room are shocked, but most of the teenagers didn't even get bothered by the word that I used, because you're that accustomed to it. Because you use it, and you hear it. And here's what I'd like to propose as we get started. It's not why and how you were created, and it's certainly not what relationships were intended to be. This is no secret. You're in a church, and this is not myth, legend. We're not trying to brainwash you. If you don't do the whole Bible, Jesus, God thing much, and you're thinking, well, this is what you're supposed to say, I'm going to push it back for just a second, but I want to ask every single teenager and adult to look at me. I am firmly convinced that God created you. You are his idea. But this is even cooler. God also created relationships and sex. Sex was God's idea. Think about that for just a second. Most of you have never thought about where did that come from. In fact, some of you convinced yourself it's just this innate animalistic desire inside of us. God created you, and God created your sexuality. He created you that way. During the course of creation, there was a board meeting of angels, and God looked at the angels and said, I have an incredible idea. And the angels were like, what? And he said, sex. And all the male angels were like, hallelujah. Right? They got fired up about it. And all the girls were like, oh, man, okay? But sex was God's idea. But watch this. Sex isn't for ready people. Sex isn't for mature people. Heads up, sex isn't even for in-love people. Sex is for married people. Sex is the ultimate expression of intimacy between two people within the context of marriage. It is like fire. You keep a fire in the fireplace, it is beautiful, warm, sexy. I mean, it's awesome. But you take the same fire out and put it on your living room rug, and it causes a mess. And here's what I know. Some of you, with your thoughts, with your actions, and your behavior, have decided to take what was intended to be in a specific context, and you created a mess in your life. And some of you, you're tempted to do it. And those of you that are younger and you're not there, you're looking at me going, you said sex. And you're like, what is this all about? And there are some of you that are going, but hold up, homie, I'm not even sure there's a God. So you're saying that God created me, and consequently, I should start adhering to what God thinks about my sexuality? Absolutely yes. There's no question in my mind that that's how you should operate sexually. And here's the reason why. Because if God is the inventor of something, isn't it interesting that if your iPhone or your Samsung or whatever it is that you use breaks, you go to the place who you bought it from, and they send it to the place that made it. Why? Because you want to get it fixed. Why is it that most of you in this room, as it relates to relationships and your sexuality, instead of you looking at the one who created it, you go to other teenagers who don't know anything about it? Doesn't it make sense that if God created sex, that we would go to him and go, what's your plan for it? But Stuart, again, I'm not even sure there's a God. Cool. Well, then you explain you to me, and if your explanation is strong enough, I'll be willing to listen to you. But you're going to have to explain to me this fact. You're going to have to explain to me, every teenager and adult, look, if you don't think that there's a God, you've got to explain to me how you, as a young man and as a young lady, you are 60%, think about this for just a second, you are 60% water. About 10 gallons of you is water. That's why when some of you hugged the person earlier, they squished, okay? You are 60% water. About 60% water. About 10 gallons of water inside of you. Did you know that water, your body is made up of these things called cells, and inside those cells are protons and neutrons and electrons, and it gets down to these things called atoms. Scientists have now understood that there are probably subatomic particles, about 150 plus of those they've discovered. But if you want to know how small an atom is, let your mind get blown at how big our Earth is. Okay, everybody got it? An atom to an orange is what an orange is to the Earth. Let that sit with you for just a second. It's that minuscule and small. And you are 60% water. How many atoms are in water? Check this out. If we were try to count the number of atoms in one drop of water, it would take every single person on the planet counting on the hour, every single person counting an atom per second for the next 20,000 years. That's you. And here's what's amazing for those of you that there is no God. You do realize, right, that scientists can split your existence down to a subatomic particle. Everybody look at me. But they have no explanation from where that subatomic particle started or came from. And the only explanation, if they can't explain where that subatomic particle started and came from, is that it came from something that isn't physical. That's spiritual. That's supernatural. That's you. And none of us walked in this afternoon, none of us walked in thinking about this fact, that you are standing on a green marble. Sitting on a green marble. We call it Earth. Let's use the arms as an example. You are sitting right now on this green marble called Earth, and on this green marble called Earth, this green marble is flying 67,000 miles an hour through the universe. And while it's flying 67,000 miles an hour through the universe, it is spinning 1,000 miles an hour while it's flying through the universe. And nobody in this room loses their balance, or we see your hair go back. And you never thought about it, and you can't explain it. And while we're going 67,000 miles an hour through the universe, spinning 1,000 miles an hour as we do it, we stay this perfect distance of 93 million miles from the sun. If that ever changed by 1 degree, we would either burn up or freeze. And you can't explain why. And while we're going 67,000 miles an hour, spinning 1,000 miles an hour, 93 million miles from the sun, we stay at this perfect 23.5% tilt because of the gravity of the moon and the sun, 40% from one, 60% from the other. And if that ever changed, we would either freeze or burn up, and you can't explain why. What you say is there is no God, and sexual appetite is just animalistic. Explain that. You at least, teenager, you at least adult, have to explain how that works. You have to explain how all of us in this room with that 60% water in our body, it has 3.4% salt in it, the same amount of salt, by the way, that is in the ocean. And if the ocean ever changes or the salt in your body ever changes, you die. But, oh, that's right. There is no God. Because you know how you exist. And can we just be honest for just a second? Wherever there is that kind of intelligibility, the only logical conclusion is that it is created by ultimate intelligence. You are an accident. You are not an accident. But Stuart, what about all the bad in the world? You're exactly right. Can you throw that next picture up on the screen? Parkland, Douglas High School, just a few days ago. 17 people dead, 14 others wounded. And I'm fairly certain that there's not anybody in the room that thought, that was fair. Is there anybody else like me that goes, I'm nauseated by it, it breaks my heart, right adults? Right teenagers? Am I right, teenagers, that there's a part of you that worries about when you go to school now?
Yeah.
Especially that guy. And why is it that you had that thought? Listen, why is it that you had that thought that that is wrong? Because if there is no God, you have no reason to have any sort of moral compass in your life. But because you thought it was wrong, there is some sort of moral code in you. Because moral reasoning screams that there's some sort of moral code that is beyond and bigger than anything that you are about. And that's the reason why. That's the reason why. When I think that God says, I created sex, and I created it for you, I created this whole relationship idea for a certain way in a certain context, then you need to determine, you need to figure out, what do you do with the fact that God created you, made you, He has formed you perfectly, and He gave you this perfect gift. Listen to me, middle schoolers. Every high school senior in this room that has messed up sexually wishes they could go back and sit where you were sitting. To go back and do it right. But what you and I have to ask is simply this. What is it that matters most? See, I think when you discover the most important thing that you and I can do is to discover what you were created to do is determined by who created you. And when you discover what matters most, you're far less likely to give in to things that you just simply want. The creator of the universe goes, here's a gift, your sexuality. You're not a human being trying to figure out how to be spiritual. You are a spiritual being trying to figure out how to be a good human. C.S. Lewis said that you are a spiritual entity. You're trying to figure out how to do humanity well. And the guy who wrote half of the New Testament, a historical figure by the name of Paul, who didn't always believe that Jesus was the Son of God, but guess what changed for Paul, guys? You know what changed for Paul? Jesus rose from the dead, a historical event. When Jesus rose from the dead, Paul has this incredible experience with Jesus, and he goes from hating people who followed Jesus to following Jesus himself. And one of the things that he started doing is writing these letters to these people groups all around the Mediterranean Rim who had abandoned whatever faith tradition they had and started following Jesus. One of those letters was to a church in Corinth. And when he wrote that church in Corinth, here's what was going down in that church. What was going down in the church is that there was so much sexual, so much relational pressure that people were deciding to lower their standards and do what everybody said they wanted to do. And I love the fact in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 26, Paul said this, because of the present crisis, I think it's best to remain as you are. He says this to the church in Corinth, because of the present crisis, I think that it's best that you remain as you are. What's interesting about that verse is the phrase present crisis. Guess what it means? It literally translates the pressures of life. Here's in essence what he was saying to those guys and girls, those women and men in the church of Corinth. Because you are living in a pressure cooker, don't move. Don't make a move. Don't start thinking about doing something that you're going to regret. Just chill for a second and let's get our mind and hearts around what is right, pure, good, and holy. And that's kind of what we want to do today. Don't move. Just chill. Girls, it's so hard, right? If you're tempted to give in because he's so funny, blows your mind, and he's been tempting you, right? Because he's talking all that noise, like, girl, you know you're fine. All that stuff, he's like, no, I promise I'll spend money on you. Burger King, me and you. I'll buy you a crown. You know that crown? Like, I'll take you to Taco Bell, and you're like, yo quiero taco hell. No, you know? All the noise, fellas, that you learn how to talk, and even some guys in this room, she's you know, pressing hard, and come on, man, come on, boy, you know, this nobody, what a man, you know, that whole thing. Paul goes, whoa, press pause. Stop for just a second. Remain as you are. You get this thing worked out. And if I may, everybody look. Here's part of the pressure of life, adults, that we've got to admit we have contributed to. Every teenager, look. Some of you in this room have convinced yourself that being and having a relationship in middle school and high school is the report card that you're getting graded by. Listen to me. A relationship is not life's report card. Let me tell you what you really should be after. You really want to meet the man of your dreams? Yes, please. Yes. Dude, you want to meet the woman of your dreams? Where is she? Oh, what? All right. Here's what you need to do. You need to figure out what you're gifted and passionate about. What are your gifts and what is your passion and how do those mesh with your purpose? Because if God made you, if God created you, this is the reason why you're on the planet. You are on the planet to make much of God with your life. You figure out how you're gifted, you figure out what you're passionate about, and where those things mesh with your purpose, and you get busy doing those. And guess, I promise you, this will happen. Somebody else is going to come along doing the same exact thing. And you're going to look up from being so busy doing what you're passionate and gifted at doing, and you're going to look over here and go, oh my Lord, girl, you make my tea sweat. And girls, you're going to look at him and go, you're kind of cute. Hi. You know, you're going to do that. And for some of you, you need to learn the lesson that I did. I met my wife my senior year in college. I was a basketball player 50 pounds ago in college. She was the hottest thing on our campus, and all my teammates and I knew about her, but I was just like every dude in this room who thinks he's got game. I was scared to death to say a word to her. She was that pretty and that intimidating. And wouldn't you know it, first class, second semester, I walk into the class with my teammates, and I look immediately, first row, second, third chair, there she's sitting. And I did what every swagging, delicious dude in this room would do. I went to the opposite side of the room and sat down. Because she scared me. And a long story short, she and I got in an argument in class. It was an ethics class where we had to debate. And at the end of that class, all my teammates, a couple of classes after the first class, at the end of that class, she storms out of the room and all my teammates are like, "Whoo, you don't have a chance." And I walked out and she was waiting in the hall. And she said, "What is wrong with you? What was up with that?" And I'm like, "Well, let's go get a Coke and talk about it." And so we go and hang out for 2 weeks. Now watch this. And I was so unsure of my gifting, my passion, and my purpose that in 2 weeks, she sniffed it out. She said, in no uncertain terms, "You need to go figure out why you're on the planet, because I'm not the reason for your existence." And for a year and a half, I didn't see her. I didn't say a word to her. She told her youth pastor that it would be a cold day in hell before she ever went out with Stuart Hall. But I bet y'all didn't know that Satan was ice skating these days. She came home to daddy. No. Listen. That is way so arrogant, and it didn't happen that way. Because what happened over the course of that year and a half is God doing such a deep, painful, deliberate work in my heart and life to figure out, this is why you're on the planet, this is how you're gifted, this is what you're passionate about, this is why you exist, now go chase that. And here's what I can tell you. I cannot tell you, girls, who the future Mr. Right is for you. And anybody that stands up and goes, "It's him, it's them, it's there." Nope. Fellas, I can't tell you who she is. And some of you are convinced it's going to be this one specific person, and if you're not on the lookout and if you're not prowling, then you're going to miss them. Nothing could be further from the truth. The only way you're going to miss what God has for you is when you decide to not get busy while God puts you on the planet. And he puts you on the planet to make much of himself. And watch, middle schoolers, you're too young to fall in love, but you're not too young to live for your purpose. And high school students, you may be too immature or too hurt or got some things to work out for you to be in love right now, but you're not too hurt and you're not too young and you're not too tainted for you to do what you've been put on the planet to do. And here's how I know this is a big deal. Because there are adults listening to me right now, and guess why some of these adults are here listening and leading breakouts? Because we wish to God when we were your age that we would have decided to get busy doing what we were put on the planet to do, instead of looking for who we can make out with, hook up with. So think about that. Let me pray first. Jesus, here's what I pray. As we dive into these breakouts, that for the next little bit, you would do something really cool in us, through us, for us, to us, among us. And we pray this in the only name that matters, the name that is above every name, and the name for which and why we exist, the name of Jesus. Amen.
guys. Well, that concludes our first session. Wasn't Stuart awesome? Come on, thank you, Stuart.
Alright, so here's how this is going to work, guys. So you have designated areas that each of you are going to go to. So we have middle school boys. Raise your hand. Middle school girls. You're in your own room. High school boys. High school girls. You have your own little breakouts. And if you look up here on the screen, they show us right here where you're going. So middle school boys are going to 503 through 505. Girls, 501, 502. High school guys are going to be in the studio. High school girls are going to be in 506, 507. Now wait, before you go. One more thing. You have about, what, 10 minutes? Oh, that's the broken cell phone. Way to go, Rachel. You got about 10 minutes to use the restroom, get a drink. You need to be in your main session, in your breakout by 3:10, and then be done by 3:55 so we can kick back off again at 4 p.m. Got it?
You want this?
All right.
Is that like recording?
The book says that the girls are in the studio. So it's okay. Nope. Okay. They're going by.
Oh.